Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Happy Friday. According to a news report that dropped last night, Michael Cohen, that is, of course, Donald Trump's former personal attorney, is prepared to testify in the Mueller probe that the president knew about a June 2016 meeting in New York City between his son, Don Jr., and a Russian lawyer who had claimed she had dirt on the Hillary Clinton campaign. That's the claim. So for the sake of argument, let's assume that all of it is literally true. What does it mean exactly, and why should we care? If you've been watching television over the past 24 hours, you already know the answers to those questions. What this means is the end of the Trump presidency, if not of the United States itself. We should care because nothing in human history, since the harnessing of fire and the invention of the wheel, isn't as inherently momentous as this, Don Jr.'s brief meeting 2 years ago with an unknown Russian lawyer called Natalia Veselnitskaya. Who knew about this meeting? And when did they know about it? And what were they wearing when they met? It is on questions like these that the fates of nations hang. Here's a selection of both the huffing and the puffing.
That puts Donald Trump in a conspiratorial mode on this issue before the fact. That evidence on its face, if it was supported, would be an impeachable offense.
It shows that he had prior knowledge that the Russians were seeking to do this, and he didn't stop the meeting. He was giving a green light for the Russians to interfere.
Until now, we have not had a smoking gun that placed Donald Trump Sr., the president himself, in the center of the conspiracy. This is potentially huge. This is potentially something that can prove the president colluded, and that is an impeachable offense.
So there's criminal liability here for the president on the horizon.
Well, so there you have it. Internationally recognized genius Max Boot thinks this is a big deal. Is it? Well, if the president lied about it or anything else under oath, yes, it is. That would be a big deal. Perjury is always a big deal. They don't tell Bill Clinton's defenders that. Otherwise, though, it's hard to see the point of all of this hysteria. What exactly would the crime here be? It's not illegal to talk to foreigners. Nobody is claiming that any information changed hands, though even if it did, so what? As principled lefty Glenn Greenwald wrote this afternoon, quote, if getting dirt about your opponent from foreign officials is immoral or treasonous, why was it okay for DNC representatives to be trolling around Ukraine working with foreign officials to get dirt on Manafort and Trump because Ukraine favored Hillary? Good question. Keep in mind, too, that the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign both paid a foreign national, his name is Christopher Steele, to gather damaging information on Donald Trump from other foreign nationals, including and especially from Russians. And unlike the Trump campaign, the Democrats actually succeeded. They produced an entire dossier based on misinformation from Russian sources. That dossier changed the course of American history. The Obama administration used it to spy on its political opponents and to begin a series of investigations that have, from the very first day, overshadowed and in some cases neutered the Trump administration. Pretty effective, just in case you're looking for actual examples of foreign collusion. Now, Democrats are claiming just the opposite, of course, accusing their opponents of doing pretty much exactly what they themselves did. At first, that may look like hypocrisy, and it is, but it's more than that. It's a political tactic. You scream as loud as you can in the hope that your opponents will be intimidated into accepting your essentially fraudulent premise. It often works, and that's exactly why they do it, but it only works when the rest of us play along with it. So let's stop playing along with it. Chris Hahn is a radio show host from New York. He's a former staffer to Senator Chuck Schumer, and he joins us tonight. So can you explain to me, Chris, why, if it's wrong to meet with Russians in the hope of getting dirt on your political opponent, it's okay to pay a foreign national to get dirt from Russians about your political opponent, which the DNC and the Hillary campaign both did?
Well, it's very different for a campaign to spend money to do opposition research in a foreign country than for a foreign government like the Russians to actually invest in disarming our election security to benefit one candidate. That's the big difference here. There's nothing wrong with trying to figure stuff out and paying for your own research. But when the Russian government's intentionally attacking this country...
But hold on, they did do that. I mean, the Russian government, hold on, we know this, it's not speculation, fed disinformation to Christopher Steele.
Absolutely.
Russian agents fed disinformation to Christopher Steele, who was paid by the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary campaign to get that information. So I'm not accusing anyone of a crime. I'm merely saying that's a step farther than what you're accusing Don Jr. of doing in the meeting with Veselnitskaya. But that's okay because it's, quote, very different.
Well,
so maybe speak a little slower and explain to me how that's very different, if you would.
Well, here's the difference when it comes to Don Jr. If, under your premise that what Michael Cohen is saying is true, and Donald Trump Sr. knew about the meeting, Donald Trump Jr. perjured himself to Congress, and that is a crime. Right? And it is also, we have to ask the question, if it was no big deal and nothing really came of it, why are they all lying about it? Because they've been lying about it for 2 years now.
Okay, so
and
therefore
it's something I think that we need to know.
Okay. Well, let me just say, I stipulated at the outset that lying under oath, this will come as a surprise to Clinton defenders, is a crime that we ought to take seriously, and I do take it seriously. And if it's shown that anyone lied under oath, I think that person should be punished for that, because it's a crime. Right. I believe in punishing crimes, including entering the country illegally.
And under your premise, that you started the show with, Donald Trump Jr. would have lied. Right.
Well, I don't know that. I don't know anything about what he knew. I don't know if Cohen is telling the truth. I don't know why Trump would hire Cohen in the first place as his lawyer. There's a lot I don't know. But what I do know is the core accusation that somehow it's immoral to meet with the Russian source to get dirt on your opponent is exactly what the DNC and the Hillary campaign successfully did. But you're cool with that, but it's treason when Trump does it. Explain how that works.
Tucker, what the email to Don Jr. said was, this is how the Russian government hopes to aid your father. That was in the email. If that email had gone to Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton, the same people in Congress who spent three years investigating who wrote the talking points would have hearing after hearing after hearing. Congress needs to do its job and have a hearing now.
Okay. But why shouldn't we have, since we know that the Russian government aided the Clinton campaign by giving false information to Christopher Steele,
having been paid
to gather it? Yes, we do know that. We don't know that. We don't know that, he got his information from Russia.
We don't.
Well, they testified in Congress under oath that he did. And we also know that it was just disinformation.
Christopher Steele was paid to go get information.
From the Russians. Where do you think the information came from?
From wherever he could get it from.
From the Russians.
He was not given a direction by the. He was not given direction by the Clinton campaign on how to do his job.
Hold on. First of all, you don't know that, but we know for a fact that he got information from the Russian government. Hold on, but that's not a big deal because look, this is just ludicrous. Right. It's a farce, actually, and I must say, sick of playing along with it. If there's perjury, convict for perjury, indict for perjury, and see if you can convict. But let's stop pretending that meeting with a foreigner is a crime. Let me show you a picture. You tell me if this is a crime. Here's a photograph. This is someone you know, actually. This is Chuck Schumer. He's meeting with Vladimir Putin.
I can't see it.
You can't see it. Well, it's your former boss, Senator Chuck Schumer of New York, the senior senator from New York.
But the question is,
I thought he was a loyal American.
It was 2002, and... in 2002,
I thought he was a patriotic person. Now I'm finding out he's disloyal.
2013, 2016.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it was cool for him to meet
Luke oil station in New York. But okay.
So they're doing secret energy deals together. I'm not saying that Chuck Schumer should be imprisoned for treason. I'm not saying that. Okay. I'm just raising the question.
First of all, you're smart enough to know what that is.
I'm smart enough to know that all of this is insane.
Look, you're smart enough to know what that is.
You guys are using rhetoric that's so destructive and crazy that it's hurting the country.
There could be what has to happen here is Congress needs to have an investigation to know exactly what went on.
To get to the bottom of what Chuck Schumer was talking to Vladimir Putin about.
We get to the bottom of it, and we could have the truth. If you want to have a hearing about what Chuck was talking about at the Luke oil station where they were eating donuts, go right ahead and do that. But we want to have a hearing right now about what happened in 2016 and what's happening right now to this country.
Okay, but should we have, since we know for a fact that the Hillary Clinton campaign paid a foreign national to get dirt from the Russians, shouldn't we have a hearing about that? Or is that somehow outside the scope of the hearing you proposed because it wouldn't help your party? Because this is all partisan crap, actually. Let's just be real. Can we?
They've already had numerous hearings about the Steele dossier, but they won't have any hearings about what Don Jr. said to his dad. And we both know, by the way, we both know that Don Jr. told his dad about this meeting. We both know that.
I know no such thing.
Clear.
Really? How do you know that?
Okay, there's no way.
How do you know that?
There's no way.
Have you talked to them today?
There's just no way. The nature of people.
Hold on. Just sort of wondering, how often do you assert things as fact that you don't really know are fact? Do you say we know something when we don't really know? Is this a common tactic that you use?
I think that I think that it is my
you don't really know.
Opinion.
So when you say we really know, what you're really saying is I have no idea, but I'm guessing
because it helps my side. Don Jr. and whose whole life is owned to Don Sr. would tell Don Sr. when there was something that he thought he was going to get Don Sr.
So what you're saying is you
Don Sr.'s done a
probably
lot
have
for
some
Don
kind of
Jr.
personal
When Don Jr. thought he could do something for Don Sr., he'd probably tell him. Look,
based on your intimate
all
knowledge
I'm saying
of Trump
is
family
Congress
dynamics.
should get to the bottom of it.
This is getting too crazy for me. I don't want to wreck people's
If it's true, it's evidence.
Congress, get to the bottom of it. People should stop pretending this is real because it's fake, and everyone now knows it's fake. So we're proceeding on that assumption henceforth. As you would put it, we know that. Chris, good to see you. Sorry. I'm getting too spun up. Dan Bongino, a former Secret Service agent, NRA TV contributor, he joins us now. So I think I'm starting to conclude, Dan, that that we are actually complicit in this insanity by playing along with it. So when someone who paid money to a foreign national to get dirt from the Russians whips around and accuses someone else of colluding with the Russians, you shouldn't take it seriously. And we all are taking it seriously. Why are we adding to the sum total of the craziness by pretending this is real?
I don't know. I like Chris off the air a lot, but I think we're all dumber for having seen that. He's a great guy, but we're all dumber. We may have lost about 10 IQ points having watched that, because you notice how he scrambled when you asked him a very simple question. Listen, this is a complicated case. Let me distill this down to one simple thing, and you're right. We are all adding to the madness because we cannot figure out how in one case, this is the crime of the century, a meeting in Trump Tower between Trump's kid and a couple of Russians who, by the way, one of them's connected to the Clintons through his lawyer. The other one's connected to Fusion GPS, who the Clintons hired. They show up. They pass no information about actual Russians or collusion, right? That's the crime of the century. But actual Russians who put together information according to their own dossier, who passed it to the Clinton team, which was used, Tucker, to spy on an American citizen and take down a presidency. That's no big, hey, nothing to see here, folks. Ignore that. But pay attention to this meeting. This is insane. I can't believe we're even having this conversation.
Well, let me just say, but I should also note that we learned recently that if you have any questions about what the government did, spying on that private American citizen, you, Dan Bongino, are unpatriotic.
Right.
So why don't you take that home and meditate on it for a minute? You're unpatriotic asking questions because it is wrong to question the official narrative of anything. Got it?
It is. Listen, when I was a Secret Service agent, it is the very essence of a constitutional republic to question authority. Do you understand this whole case is based on the dossier? A dossier, by the way, here's Michael Cohen's tweet, by the way, about the dossier. He called it a lie-filled document. So, Tucker, their star witness calls it a lie-filled document. Jim Comey, the director of the I, calls their whole case, the dossier, salacious and unverified. The number 2 in the FBI says they wouldn't have had a case without it. The head of the division investigating the case says it was in its infancy, the verification, and the lead investigator in the case, when asked about a global view of it, texts his girlfriend that there's no there. Yeah, sounds like a winner. This sounds like a great case. You guys really knocked it out of the park, you libs.
I gotta say, I don't want to be mean, but I can't imagine how you could wind up with Michael Cohen as your personal lawyer. I mean, whoever's running the Trump HR department needs to be fired because, you would not hire Michael Cohen as your lawyer. Just throwing that out there. Sorry, I can't control myself. Yeah. Dan, great to see you.
Yes, sir. You got it, bud.
One of the biggest tech companies, Twitter, was just caught suppressing the accounts of lawmakers whose politics the owners of Twitter don't agree with. One of those lawmakers taking action, and he's going to join us next to explain what he's going to do. Stay tuned. Well, Twitter has long denied that it is biased against conservative accounts. That's obviously a lie. It's always obviously been a lie, and now it is a proven lie. A new report by Vice found that the Republican lawmakers and other conservative accounts wouldn't show up in the search bar when users searched for them. That is censorship, obviously, and it was intentional. Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida was one of those conservatives shadow banned by Twitter. He just filed a complaint against the company with the Federal Election Commission. Congressman Gaetz joins us tonight. Congressman, thank you for coming on. So I guess the first is a factual question. You're certain that this happened to you and it was intentional?
Well, Well, I'm certain that there were only 4 members of Congress who had their voices suppressed on Twitter: Matt Gaetz, Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, and Devin Nunes. So that'd be one hell of a coincidence. My suspicion is that if people were effectively communicating a conservative message, they got caught in Twitter's troll trap. The reason that I think that is illegal is because that it gives advantages to our political opponents. It gives them access to the platform that we don't have. If Twitter was a billboard company and they gave Democrats access to their billboards and not Republicans, that would be an illegal corporate donation to the campaigns of Democrats. Here, instead of the billboard, it's the auto fill-in function as a part of Twitter's search feature that wasn't available to me, Devin Nunes, Mark Meadows, or Jim Jordan, and it's available to Democrats.
You believe that the FEC can remedy this?
They absolutely can institute fines, just like they could institute fines and punishment against any company that illegally makes a corporate donation to a political campaign. Here, the corporate donation is allowing Democrats and the people running against me specifically to have access to elements of the search feature that I didn't have access to. And why, Tucker? Why? Twitter has said in their official response that it was my behavior that resulted in this. I don't know what behavior that is. So are we really going to trust tech companies to be able to just decide with no transparency what behavior limits someone's ability to amplify their message? That sounds like the Tech Tyranny series you did a couple months ago is coming to life before our very eyes.
Well, it clearly is. And Twitter is a fairly small player in this world. It's a failing company anyway. Google dominates all of tech. And in fact, it's the portal through which almost all human information flows. So if Google were to hold things back in search or put its thumb on the scale in any way, they could have a huge effect on our society. Congress exists to make sure that the public interest is represented. And yet I've never heard a member of Congress say, we're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to break up Google. We're going to fulfill our oversight role here. Why not?
Well, frankly, too many members of Congress just don't understand the gravity of the issue. But now we're the ones that have the targets drawn on our foreheads. And so I think that you'll see more engagement from the Congress coming forward. A reasonable libertarian might ask, why shouldn't I just leave Twitter? Why should I have excessive government regulation? And it's important to recognize Twitter and other social media companies use the federal government to get rid of lawsuits that they don't want to have to defend against. And they use a provision that requires them to hold themselves out as a neutral public forum. So Twitter and Facebook can't say on one hand, we're neutral and thus we shouldn't have to respond to lawsuits, and then on the other hand, tell me and other outspoken conservatives that our behavior results in suppression on their platform. Right. They can't have it both ways.
Well, Google has a monopoly, as does YouTube, and they routinely suppress political views they don't agree with, and the Congress does absolutely nothing about it. And I hope they will change their ways immediately. Congressman, thank you. It was great to see you, and I hope you'll keep us posted on how this turns out.
Will do. Thanks, Tucker.
Up next, the Southern Poverty Law Center is, of course, a sham group dedicated to shaming enemies of the left. And yet the FBI is collaborating with them. This is a story we have broken, and we'll tell you what we found next. If you've been paying any attention at all, the Southern Poverty Law Center is an entirely fraudulent enterprise. The organization has nothing to do with the South or with poverty. It's a left-wing political group that uses hate crime designations to target its ideological enemies and to crush people. In 2012, the SPLC inspired a shooting attack on the Family Research Council by labeling the innocuous Christian organization a hate group. Just last month, the SPLC paid $3.3 million for falsely calling the Quilliam Foundation, quote, anti-Muslim extremists. We could go on. The Southern Poverty Law Center lies. They are utterly reckless, and they're totally dishonest. With that in mind, it was shocking to discover, as jaded as we are, and this show has discovered it exclusively, that the FBI has a long history of collaborating with the Southern Poverty Law Center. In 2009, for example, the FBI called the SPLC, quote, a well-known, established, and credible organization that monitors domestic terrorism in the U.S. The SPLC repeatedly has been allowed to brief FBI personnel on alleged terror threats to target its ideological enemies and to crush people. In 2012, the SPLC inspired a shooting attack on the Family Research Council by labeling the innocuous Christian organization a hate group. Just last month, the SPLC paid $3.3 million for falsely calling the Quilliam Foundation, quote, anti-Muslim extremists. We could go on. The Southern Poverty Law Center lies. They are utterly reckless, and they're totally dishonest. With that in mind, it was shocking to discover, as jaded as we are, and this show has discovered it exclusively, that the FBI has a long history of collaborating with the Southern Poverty Law Center. In 2009, for example, the FBI called the SPLC, quote, a well-known, established, and credible organization that monitors domestic terrorism in the U.S. The SPLC repeatedly has been allowed to brief FBI personnel on alleged terror threats to this country. Disturbingly, though, this relationship is ongoing, if you can believe it. Despite multiple requests from this program, the FBI has refused to describe the extent of its collaboration with the SPLC, we've asked repeatedly, or even to explain why it continues to work with a group like that. Instead, we've received meaningless and mindless boilerplate statements like this one, quote, for many years, the FBI has engaged with various organizations, both formally and informally. Such outreach is a critical component of the FBI's mission, and we welcome information from these organizations on any possible violation of civil rights, hate crimes, or other potential crimes or threats. We do, however, evaluate our relationships with these groups as necessary to ensure the appropriateness of any interaction. Again, mindless pap that does not answer the question. We can report tonight that Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida has sent a letter to FBI leadership asking them to explain their relationship with the SPLC, which is obviously very troubling, to put it mildly. Then tonight, the DOJ gave us another statement. This one said, quote, the Attorney General has directed the FBI to reevaluate their relationships with groups like this, the SPLC, to ensure the FBI does not partner with any group that discriminates, end quote, as the SPLC certainly does. Maajid Nawaz is the founder of Quilliam. He just received that settlement we mentioned from the SPLC after they libeled him as an extremist. He's also the author of a tremendous book called Radical, My Journey Out of Islamist Extremism. Maajid Nawaz joins us tonight. Thanks very much for coming on. So it was partly from watching what they did to you that had us asking the question, well, you know, to what extent are they involved with the federal government? And we discovered this. But tell our viewers who maybe haven't followed this as closely your experience with the SPLC.
Well, it's curious and fascinating at the same time because I have been born and raised a Muslim. I spent my teenage years, in fact, with an Islamist organization seeking to enforce Sharia law in Muslim-majority societies because I got radicalized. I ended up as a political prisoner in Egypt for my beliefs, and it was in jail that I reformed my views and came out vowing to challenge Islamist extremism and founded Quilliam in 2008 and have been doing so now for 10 years. And the Southern Poverty Law Center decided to compile a list of what they deemed as anti-Muslim extremists, and the oddity, the sheer oddity of placing a Muslim on a list of anti-Muslim extremists is what led me to then say, I need justice in this case, because my entire life, Tucker, has been defined by my struggle, and I got it wrong initially. I've been open about that. I wrote about it in my book. My struggle to find a place for Muslims in the West that is at home with the West. And so to undermine my entire life's work by placing me on a list of anti-Muslim extremists, I found a step too far, and that's why I went to lawyers and got advice, and it's why we took the action we did.
And I can say, as someone who's interviewed scores of people like you, I think you are one of the most restrained and thoughtful and reasonable people on this topic I've ever interviewed. So to call you an extremist is very odd and dishonest. So what effect did it have on you? Once a group like this defines you as an extremist, I mean, that's got to hurt your foundation, I would think.
Well, first of all, I've got to say it places a target on the heads. Look, it's no secret. It's already hard enough for Muslim reformers, liberal Muslim reformers, to speak out against extremism within our communities. People that do so are often targeted and often killed. There was a similar list that was published in Bangladesh against so-called Muslim heretics, and many of them were knocked off, assassinated by jihadists because they were deemed to be blasphemous or heretical. Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who has since sought refuge in the United States of America,
yes.
Her close friend, a film director, Theo van Gogh, was murdered on the streets of Amsterdam, and then a list was stabbed into his body, and it named Ayaan as being next. That's what we're up against here. And so the first thing it did is it placed me in grave danger. It placed Ayaan Hirsi Ali in grave danger because she was also named on this list. But it also had material consequences. When they did what they did, the reason they produced these lists is to convince media and to convince philanthropists and foundations not to give grants to these sorts sorts of people or these organizations. And it did have those kind of material consequences for us as well. And it's why we couldn't just lie back and take this at face value as it was. We had to take action.
And I'm glad that you did. And the fact that our FBI is collaborating with a group this discredited and reckless is really scary. Thank you very much for your account. I appreciate that. And congratulations on winning. You deserve it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, there was solid economic news today as the Commerce Department estimated a robust 4.1 GDP annual growth rate in the second quarter of the year. That's the biggest single quarter gain in 4 years. America needs good economic growth, obviously, to help solve the plight of young people who are suffering under much greater debt burdens than their parents were at their age. One of the reasons so many of them call themselves socialists. Every year the student loan bubble grows. The average graduate now leaves school with over $30,000 in loans to pay off. What do they get in exchange? Not much. Lenore Hawkins is chief macro strategist for Techmatica Research. We recently talked to her about the growing debt crisis. Here's the conversation. Lenore, thank you for coming on. What are the effects of this on the country?
Well, one of the things this is doing is within the housing market, it's delaying the purchase of the first home an average of 7 years. And that affects not just the person buying the home, but that affects all of the economy because that person isn't getting those additional 7 years of wealth accumulation as their house appreciates in value. It affects the people selling their homes because you're removing a group of buyers from the equation because they just have so much debt they can't afford to be buying a home.
$1.5 trillion is almost too big a number to put into any kind of context. I mean, there are very few countries in the world with a GDP bigger than that. So what would happen if borrowers started to default on those loans?
When we take it in context of the size of our economy, it's a truly astounding number. The economy per year generates about $18 trillion, and that $1.5 trillion is bigger than everything we owe on cars. All the car loans are about $1.1 trillion. Credit card debt is less than $1 trillion. So if these guys start to default, who's going to be left holding the bag? Well, one of the really big challenges here is you can't actually get through bankruptcy. You can't remove this debt where you can with everything else. So what are you going to do? You're not going to pay your credit card bill. You're not going to pay your mortgage. You're not going to pay your home loan because you don't have a choice, even when you go to bankruptcy, to not pay your student debt.
Well, I don't understand exactly how that works, and I'm not advocating people going bankrupt. I mean, there are moral issues around that. But I do wonder why student loan debt is exempted from the normal bankruptcy protections. How did that happen? How did they get a pass on that?
Well, you could actually extinguish it in bankruptcy up until 1995 when Congress tightened it up, making it all but impossible. However, they did exclude, and you have to love this, their own offspring. So if you are the child of a member of Congress, you can't extinguish your student loans by going to bankruptcy court. You've got to love that.
For real?
Yes.
Well, that's unbelievable. So was this a lobbying operation where student loan lenders decided, well, you know, why would we want to face the risk of getting our not getting our money back?
Well, think about who the student loan lender is. It's the federal government. The federal government has all but run most of all other lending out of the market. You just can't compete with the federal government. And you see what the result of that is. This is very like what we saw with subprime housing, right? With the subprime housing crisis, what you saw was the government deciding that more and more people ought to own homes. So they made it easier and easier to borrow money. They kept lowering the bar so that more people would borrow money. What did that do? Well, that made the housing market shoot for the moon because more people could buy homes. Well, they've done the same thing here with education. Want more and more people to get education, which is all really good. But the way they went about doing it is to make loans more accessible. Just like we did with homes, we're making loans for education more accessible. And what has happened? You've seen the price of that education has absolutely skyrocketed. For example, if you looked at from 1985 to today, where the cost of education has gone up 4 times that of just inflation in general. And it's not like wages have been keeping up with that. In 1971, the cost of 1 year of education at college cost about little less than half of what the average guy can make in a year. Today, it's just shy of 2 years' worth.
That's unbelievable. Meanwhile, the quality of college education has plummeted. The meaning of a degree has basically evaporated. This is a scam, and I appreciate your calling it to the attention of our viewers. Thanks a lot, Lenore. Lenore Hawkins.
Thank you, Tucker.
One university is cracking down on the phrase, as you know. Doesn't seem offensive, but this college says it is indeed offensive to students. You may be confused, but liberal Sherpa Kathy Uru understands exactly why that's a good idea, and she'll tell us next. As you know, colleges are not a great place for diverse points of view or for encouraging young people to be resilient. And, as you know, British universities are even nuttier than American universities. Case in point, professors at Britain's Bath University recently told by the school's diversity network, whatever that is, to avoid using the phrase, as you know. Because, as you know, it could make out-of-the-loop students feel inadequate and drive them into a shame spiral that will result in misery and self-doubt. As you know, Kathy Uru is the founding publisher of Catalina magazine, and of course, as you know, we refer to her as the liberal Sherpa because she guides us through the rocky terrain of modern progressive thought. She joins us tonight. Kathy, thanks a lot for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm often confused, which is one of the reasons we're so grateful to have you here as our spirit guide, by these segments. But this one maybe more than most because I thought prefacing a sentence with "as you know" would be a self-esteem booster. Because you're suggesting to the person, you already know this because you're so smart. As you know, Kathy Uru, and you feel like, yeah, well, the person has confidence in me. Well, they're telling me it's bad for self-esteem? How?
Well, you're causing self-doubt, actually, when you say that to me, because I don't know. I may not know. Therefore, I have self-doubt and would not do as well as perhaps other students who may know. So I would feel that another student knows something that I don't know, and the diversity department at Bath University has found that students that do not know find this phrase, this almost idiom, to be offensive and a professor talking down to a student, and they don't do as well in their classes. So, as you know, is a phrase that specifically causes self-doubt. I'm not saying as you know.
We know, and as you know, the research has shown there's a direct connection between low self-esteem and self-doubt and achievement. People who feel inadequate work harder to become more impressive. So we should inculcate self-doubt, I would say, in students. But isn't it also a reflection of reality? Like, if you already knew, then what are you doing in college? Students are ignorant. That's why they're in school, to become learned, right?
Well, then it doesn't make sense for a professor to say to a student, as you know, in a classroom, you're using unnecessary words, which E.B. White's style manual would say you shouldn't use unnecessary words or unnecessary phrases to make your point. And using as you know is unnecessary, and you're not communicating properly with your audience. So it's not needed, and they're urging the professors not to use this phrase. It's not necessary.
But they're not urging it because they have a commitment to clear language. I mean, the people who run the humanities departments in colleges can barely speak English, as you know. They speak in this kind of esoteric educationese that means literally nothing, and that's the point, to cloak their own ignorance.
This is a diversity department that's urging this. They're urging.
Then everything I said times 5, it's even more true. But don't you want to patronize your students? Don't you want to make them feel that they know nothing? You want to highlight their ignorance because it will inculcate in them a thirst for hunger and knowledge.
It's doing the opposite, which is what they found at Bath University. The diversity department found that at this university, the students are saying that, as you know, is actually causing self-doubt. So, no, we're not supposed to patronize the students. We're supposed to fill them with confidence, and there will be wonderful leaders in the future, and we want a world like that. We want confident students.
No, I think we have a lot of confident students. I interview them all the time. I would say, in fact, we have too many confident students. If you know nothing, and most do literally know nothing, then you should be deeply insecure and silent as you learn. But let me just ask you this. If a student is so undone by having a professor use the phrase, as you know, isn't that student not really qualified for college? Shouldn't he be selling aluminum siding or doing something useful? I mean, you're not really ready for college if that undoes you, are you?
Well, isn't it wonderful that the student is speaking up at their college and saying the professor are using terms that are really not making sense, are causing self-doubt, they're speaking down to us, and as the audience, this communicator is not making sense. So, Yeah, they don't feel confident, and they are speaking up and telling this university, we feel more confident if this phrase would be eliminated. They're urging the professors to get with the program, get with this new era that we're living in. The students are diverse, and they may not have English
Join
as
the revolution
first language.
or be eaten. Very quickly, as a final question, do you personally really want to live in a world where college students are empowered to talk a lot? Honestly.
To talk a lot, to speak up. Yeah,
to give their opinions, speak up, be heard, whatever the kind of common description of it is now. Do you really want to live in that world?
Yeah, I want to live in a better world. I like a world that changes with the times. I don't want to live in a world that's...
I know you do. I know you do. That's why we love you.
Okay.
And that's why we're having you back on Monday.
Great.
For a segment that's even more confusing than this one, and I can't wait for that. Kathy Ruth, thanks very much.
Thanks.
Well, the FBI is supposed to be protecting Americans from crime. Our next guest says the FBI's war on civil liberties has made them a threat to you and me. He joins us after the break. Well, we have a public service announcement for you. We didn't expect to be bringing you this, but our crack control room team just minutes ago spotted the creepy porn lawyer in his natural habitat on CNN. They had the sound off, so they couldn't hear what he was saying. But honestly, it hurt our feelings a little bit. This is maybe the 5th or 6th other TV network he has done in recent days. We've invited him repeatedly onto this show, and he has repeatedly turned us down. We're going to ask him one more time, and we know that he's watching. Creepy porn lawyer, you always have a home on this 8 p.m. program. Anytime, we'll clear the decks for you. Hope to see you soon. Well, the FBI, like other federal organizations, has been trusted with enormous power. They can break down your front door. They can put you in jail. They're supposed to use these powers to protect Americans, and they do to some extent. But increasingly, we've seen instances of the FBI abusing its power and depriving citizens of their civil liberties. We have an obligation to speak out against that. The most obvious recent case is that of Carter Page. He was labeled a foreign agent and spied on for more than a year by the Obama administration based on the assertions in the Steele dossier, assertions which the FBI never even bothered to verify. What should we make of this? Mark Penn was an advisor to Bill Clinton. He joins us tonight. Mark, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
So I've been struck not simply by the fact this happened, but by the reaction to it. Here you have a guy who was a naval officer, Annapolis graduate, never been charged with anything, and he was spied on for a year, and the normal chorus of civil libertarians have been totally silent. Why is that?
I find it's incredible. I think people just use talking points that they had before you could actually read the warrant. I think any fair-minded person who reads this warrant comes away with the conclusion that there was no probable cause, that they scared a bunch of judges with 10 stories about potential Russia collusion, the Steele dossier, the Yahoo story that was really from Steele, and even when Steele was fired and he was compensated, he was actually on the payrolls of the FBI, the DNC, and the Hillary Clinton campaign at the same time, mind you. Even when that was discovered, they continue to use this information, indicating they had nothing else. The idea that a government can spy on political campaigns with no evidence is frightening and needs to be corrected with legislation immediately.
So the precedent this sets, we're all living in this moment, and it's very hard for us to see even a week ahead, but you've been in the White House and political campaigns. There will be another administration at some point, and then one after that. What does this mean for them? Will any president ever be able to trust that the FBI is not spying on him or his campaign?
Well, I saw in '98, working with President Clinton, the stress and strain on the president, the White House, the warping of decisions that occur with these investigations. You can see this. I don't see it personally, but you can see the kind of stress and strain now. Everyone who participated in the campaign, everyone who is an associate of Donald Trump is being shaken down, investigated, reviewed. This kind of thing is just not compatible with an open democracy where we decide things by elections. We've got to make changes here because you're going to be afraid about the FBI, the CIA, all of the intelligence agencies, what they could be doing. And not only when you're the president, but when you're running a campaign against the president. What sets this country apart is peaceful transition of government.
We're really playing with some very heavy-duty things here. Very quickly, do you think that in the next year or two there's a legislative answer that can restore confidence in these agencies?
Oh, I think that an ombudsman has to be appointed for all of these warrants in the FISA court. I think that for any warrants that really involve Americans, and particularly Americans in political campaigns, a special, really, judges and procedure so that the highest bar is established. And it's unbelievable that we haven't already moved to do that.
I agree with that. I agree with that. Mark Penn, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Maxine Waters back in the news. Especially amazing this time. Don't go away. Maxine Waters is one of the Trump administration's loudest and most persistent critics. She is beloved on the left, not for the clarity of her arguments. She doesn't really make coherent arguments. But because of her certainty, Maxine Waters has no doubt about anything she says. She knows for a certainty that she is right. How does she know that? Because God told her so.
This is the work that I've been sent to do, and as Pastor said to me when I came in this morning, when God sends you to do something, you just do it. I take out to Washington tomorrow morning, I'm going to tell them Pastor told me to come here and just do it.
There you have it. Maxine Waters isn't really a political figure anymore. She is a theologian. And that's why she fits in so perfectly on the modern left, which has become a kind of religious sect. The point isn't to convince voters anymore. It's to convert heretics and burn witches. If you're wondering why it's so hard to argue with progressives, this is why. They know before you utter a single word that they are virtuous and you are sinful. End of conversation. It's like debating a Hare Krishna. You won't get far. In some ways, it's the story of this show every night, and it's also exposed in great detail in the new book, Ship of Fools, which is coming out in October. You can order it now if you like. It explains a lot. That's it for us. Stay cheerful. It's our duty. See you Monday.